If you're an audiophile, you've probably heard of Stax headphones, even if you haven't actually listened to a pair. You might have also heard of Edifier, and you might have turned away from those pretty quickly, assuming that they're a company that just makes cheap Bluetooth earphones and headphones and speakers. What you might not know is that Edifier and Stax are the same brand these days. Sort of. Back in 2012, Edifier bought Stax, the Japanese brand responsible for the most recognisable name in electrostatic headphones. For many people, electrostatic headphones are Stax, in the same way that vacuum cleaners are Hoovers, or maybe Dysons these days. It's a little bit like if Hyundai or Kia from 7 or 8 years ago bought Porsche or Ferrari. So what does that mean for Stax? Are they getting cheaper and lower end? Sort of, but also not exactly. Edifier have kept the brands relatively separate, and they continue to develop new electrostatic models like the up-and-coming SRX1 that I'll be reviewing here soon. Make sure you subscribe if you want to catch that one. But what Edifier have also been doing is taking some of the know-how from Stax and using it to develop the Edifier branded Stax Spirit line of headphones. These are planar magnetic rather than electrostatic headphones. They're also wireless, but there's still some obvious Staxness about them. The Spirit S5 headphones come in at $500 so these are not a cheap wireless headphone. Edifier does still make cheap wireless headphones, but this isn't them. At $500, the Spirit S5 costs more than the premium offerings from Sony and Sennheiser, and I'll compare the S5s to those later. But it is worth noting that the Spirit S5s are much more directed at purist listeners wanting a great sounding wireless headphone, where the emphasis is on sound quality and a lack of wires, rather than things like active noise cancelling. And for the most part, the S5s do a good job of that. Speaking of wires, you can run the S5s via USB or a 3.5mm auxiliary cable if you want to, so in other words direct from a computer or a source like a digital audio player, but I noticed that the sound is fairly similar whether or not you're running them wireless or connected via USB or 3.5mm, so there's not really any benefit running these with a super premium source. And that's because the sound is all getting processed via the onboard Snapdragon QCC 5181 chip, and it also means that you need to have the headphones powered on no matter how you're using them. Whether it's wireless, whether it's USB, or whether it's 3.5mm, all of them need the headphone powered on. Now speaking of power, the S5s are quoted as having a battery life of 80 hours, which is fantastic. They also offer a low latency mode for gaming, which you will need because the latency is pretty strong if you're watching videos or playing games. You do get better sound quality when the low latency mode is switched off, but I would definitely be switching it on and sacrificing that tiny bit of sound quality for the benefits of in-sync audio on videos and gameplay. And on that note, something that's fantastic to see in the Spirit S5 is that despite it being a sound quality first wireless headphone, Edifier haven't chosen to deny it all of the latest tech. And so the Spirit S5 has all the best codecs like LDAC and aptX HD. It's got low latency mode. It's also got multi-point connection for using with different devices all at the same time, and it's got a dual mic setup for noise cancellation when taking calls. It's even got a great app for choosing which EQ settings you're on. You can do that through hardware buttons on the headphone as well, and you can even tell the headphones via the app which of the included pads you're using, either the stock leather pads which come fitted, or the cooling mesh ones which come in the box. And for the record, the sound quality with the different pads is basically identical. The different pads alter the character of the sound slightly, with the leather pads having a touch more weight and being a little bit smoother sounding, while the mesh pads create a slightly more delicate sound. Tonally, there is no difference, no discernible difference in their sound. It's purely the character of the sound, created by things like reflections and the absorption of sound in the cup around your ears. But the good news is, the frequency response is basically identical regardless. And so you can choose based on the comfort of the pads and or the character of sound you prefer. You're not forced to have a completely different tuning. And so far, it all seems a bit like a home run, doesn't it? Not so fast. Let's talk about what's not so great about the Spirit S5 and have a listen to the sound of their microphone quality while we're at it. Firstly, as I've already mentioned, the S5s offer no noise cancelling at all. They're a closed back wireless headphone, not an active noise cancelling headphone. On top of that, they're also not even a super duper isolating headphone. So I don't even know that you'd consider these a direct competitor to some of the options from Sony, from Sennheiser or Bose. And in fact, if you're going to be traveling in very noisy environments, you might want to look at headphones that do offer active noise cancelling. On that note, I've got a review coming up of the Edifier W830NB headphones, so subscribe if you want to see that one. That's a cheap but very good wireless active noise cancelling headphone from Edifier. Back to the competition though, where the S5s are best is in situations where there is a low to moderate level of background noise, like a quiet cafe or a quiet office environment. They do isolate noise because they're a proper close-back headphone, just don't expect them to negate the noise of a busy train, a bustling cafe, or noisy traffic. Something else that's not quite perfect about the Spirit S5s is the quality of their treble, which can sound a little bit metallic or plasticky, and which term you use would just depend on how you define it or perceive it. Either way though, there are now 3 things that we need to consider now that we've got that out into the open. The first thing is that the treble timbre issue that I just mentioned is a very, very minor issue and not a reason to avoid these. The second thing to consider is you can improve it with EQ, either with one of the 3 presets or with the customizable 4-band parametric equalizer option, which is one of the best that I've seen in terms of implementation on a device like this one. It's not overly complicated, but it is powerful enough to get the sound just how you're going to want it. But let's talk now about the third consideration in relation to the treble timbre from the Spirit S5. Even with the timbre of their treble being a little bit imperfect, the Spirit S5s still absolutely destroy the Sony WH-1000XM5 and the Sennheiser Momentum 4s. Testing each of these headphones with the best available codecs for that headphone, the Sonys are smooth, a little bit rich, and a little bit too mellow sometimes. They're extremely polite, but also, depending on your tastes, they're very easy to listen to, which can be great for what they're built for. The Sonys also offer excellent bass punch, but it could be a little bit too much for some people and require some taming through the app. And while we're talking about apps, I find the Sony app to give far less comprehensive control over the sound than what you get from the Spirit S5 app. For instance, when you get down to the bass frequencies, it's all about adjusting the bass boost function. You have no control over exactly which frequencies and what width of the spread, the boost or the cut is being applied. Going from the Sonys back to the S5s opens the sound up significantly. It brings a larger sense of soundstage, more clarity, more sense of resolution. The S5s are still very easy to listen to, but they don't sound muffled or muted at all. Going in the other direction from the Spirit S5s back to the Sonys makes the Sonys sound like they've got layers of tissue between the drivers and your ears. It sounds like they're being prevented from delivering all of the detail and all of the sound that they actually should be. And likewise, going to the Momentum 4s, their sound is also smoother and richer. Again, it's easy to listen to, especially in noisy environments where you might need to turn the volume up a little bit, but it's nowhere near as hi-fi as the Spirit S5. As I compared all 3 headphones in a bit of a round robin, the Sonys have crisper treble than the Momentum 4s, but the Sonys also have more bass in their stock setup, which tends to overpower the treble and make the Sony sound the thickest and boomiest of all of them. Meanwhile, as I kept going around the round robin, the Spirit S5s stand alone out of these 3 as the only headphone here that sounds properly audiophile in its presentation. On a track like I'm Awake, the Spirit S5s properly separate sounds like the vocals and the pianos from the other sounds within the soundstage. Each individual instrument has its very own place in the mix. With the Sonys and Sennheisers, the sound's a bit more all like one big blob. Of course, you can still hear where all the individual instruments are, but they don't feel properly separated like they do from the Spirit S5. On the other hand, the Sonys and Sennheisers do both offer excellent active noise cancelling. And so really what it comes down to is that the Spirit S5 is playing a very different game. It's like one of these headphones is playing basketball, while the other 2 are playing netball, or vice versa. The point is, they're doing a similar thing, but it's not the same thing. And so you just need to decide which setup and presentation and feature set is right for you. Of course, you might be wondering at this point if you can just EQ the Sonys or the Sennheisers to match the Spirit S5, because in my opinion, the Spirit S5 is the clear benchmark for the wireless sound quality performance out of these 3. And indeed, going on memory, even the KEF MU7 I don't think matches up to the Spirit S5. And the simple answer is no. You can't get the Sonys or the Sennheisers to match the quality of the Spirit S5. There's a level of performance and resolution from the S5's driver that you just can't extract from the Sennheisers or Sonys. That could partly be because of the design of the dynamic driver in the Sonys and the Sennheisers versus the planar magnetic in the Spirit S5. But I'm also not a believer in the idea that one sort of driver is necessarily better across the board compared to others. I've heard amazing dynamic driver headphones, and I've heard amazing planar magnetic headphones. It just so happens that on this occasion, it's the planar magnetic headphone that is wiping the floor with the two dynamic offerings. And so if you're looking for a fantastic sounding wireless closed back headphone, look no further than the Edifier Stax Spirit S5. They're an absolute joy to wear, super comfortable. You've got the choice of pads to help if you're in a hotter environment or if you just like the sound of the cooling pads better. Their app is fantastic, it's easy to use, it's not overly complicated, and they come with a lovely set of accessories like the USB cable, the 3.5mm cable, and a great carry case. If that all sounds good to you, I've got links in the description down below where you can pick these up for yourself. However, if you're commuting on buses, trains and planes and you need active noise cancelling, the Sonys and Sennheisers are still the better choice. I've linked my review up here of the Sennheiser Momentum 4s, so you can go there next and see why I think they're just a little bit better than the Sonys. For now though, I want to say a huge thanks to channel members, to channel Patreon members, and to those of you that leave super thanks on videos like this one. And until next time, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here again soon on Passion for Sound.